Hey, church family. When God commands us to do something, He expects us to obey completely. And while that may sound restrictive to us, it's actually intended for our good. God knows that His commands lead to life, and complete obedience leads us down that path of life. As we turn to 1 Kings 13 today, the land of Israel is now divided. Judah is ruled by Rehoboam in Jerusalem. Israel is ruled by Jeroboam in Shechem. And at the end of chapter 12, Jeroboam, in order to keep people from going back to Jerusalem, he set up two altars, one at Dan and one at Bethel, and set up false gods that the people of Israel could go to worship. Well, as 1 Kings 13 opens up, God has commanded a prophet, a young prophet, to go to Bethel and to pronounce judgment on the altar at Bethel. And we see in the very first part of the chapter that the young prophet does that. He obeys the command. He goes to Bethel. He pronounces judgment on that altar and in front of King Jeroboam. But then there was a second part of the command that he is tempted by. One that seems a little restricted to us, but one nonetheless that God had given him to lead him to life. And the command was that he was not to eat or drink in that land, and he was not to go back the same way that he came. Well, Jeroboam invites the young prophet to stay and to eat and drink with him. But the young prophet declines. He says, I'm not supposed to do that. God has commanded me not to do that. And so he leaves and he begins to go back a different way. Well, on his way back, an old prophet finds out what's going on, and he goes out and he invites the young prophet to come and to eat and to dine with him. And again, the young prophet says, no, I can't do that. God has commanded me not to do that. And he begins to go back. But the old prophet comes back to the young prophet and he lies to him. He says, God has told me that you can come and you can eat and you can dine with me. And the young prophet, rather than heeding God's command, listens to the words of the old prophet. And I'll let you read the details in 1 Kings 13. But ultimately, the young prophet dies. His disobedience to God's command led to his death. And the truth of Scripture is that when we disobey God's commands, it leads to brokenness, it leads to destruction, it leads to death in our lives and the lives of others. God commands us not to restrict us, but to put us on the path to life. The other takeaway I have from that passage and that interaction is that there are going to be times in our lives when God commands us to do something, that other people come and try and pull us off of that path. They try and tempt us to come along. We don't know why this old prophet lied to the young prophet, but he did. But the young prophet had not heard another word from God. And so if God commands us to do something, unless God commands us to do something else, we have to stick with God's original command, not follow others, not be pulled off the path by those who would tempt us. As you read through 1 Kings 13 today, what has God commanded you to do? If He's commanded you to do something, He wants you to obey completely, and He wants you to obey completely because He wants to put you on the path to life. Enjoy your time with Jesus today.